Lessons from the screen, what we mean is we go through different documentaries to tell you what they gon' do. Give you our lessons, give them our blessings. If they trash, we tell you there is no second guessing. Knowledge is power, but time is precious. And we're here to keep you from them lessons. So sit back as we groove, giving you the review, so you only spend time on the dots that you need to.
Welcome to another episode of Lessons from the Screen, the show where we give you a review of whether or not a documentary, a report, a news situation, any particular information that you can get from any particular screen of any kind is worth your time and energy. We waste our time, our energy, and our brain power so that you don't have to. You're welcome. Lessons from the Screen is brought to you by PackSync through the Freedom Train Network. You can find us at www.freedomtrainradio.com or Stitcher, iTunes, or Google Play. Be sure to head to one of those places and give us a review. Be sure to head to freedomtrainradio.com to interact with us, comment on the shows. And then be sure to head to our sponsors page, www.pactsinc.org, packsync.org. Show some love and support for our sponsors. PackSync is a black activist and advocacy organization focused on developing the black community through a shifting culture, education, and economics. And as always, Lessons from the Screen has a frame of reference that is aligned with that of the black community. So the things that we look at will be looked at with the racial component involved and with some lessons that can be used to help us improve our community. During this episode of Lessons from the Screen, we will be looking at the looming water crisis in South Africa. We will also be digging a little bit into the water shortages across the continent and, of course, things that we can learn from these situations. In this episode of Lessons from the Screen, we will be looking at water and Africa. Now, Cape Town has been in the news for the last couple of months as its water reserves dropped past the level of alarm and into the level of, oh shit, we finna be thirsty. The entire region of the continent is in the middle of a 3-year drought, but Cape Town is getting a lot of attention because it's a sprawling metropolis of roughly 4 million people. It's a huge tourist attraction in the middle of South Africa. And the nation has held the world's attention since the end of apartheid in the early 90s. Nelson Mandela. The city finds itself in a similar position as California's 5-year drought that ended last March. Except unlike California, Cape Town doesn't have the infrastructure to last 5 years. With that said, they are predicting that in around May of this year, the city will turn off the taps to most of the residents in the city. They took steps to reduce usage, and when most of the city's residents didn't comply, they were forced to reduce them again. And they still didn't comply. And even now, with the restrictions placed at a level of 13 gallons per day per person, which is really only about enough for a 90-second shower, 1 flush of the toilet, 1 cooked meal, 2 hand washings, about a half gallon to a gallon of drinking water, with a spit left over for washing dishes. Some of the wealthier people are still willing to just pay the fines in order to keep the lifestyles that they're accustomed to. Many have taken to blaming the community outlets, which service more than 1 million people who don't have access to water in their homes or anywhere else. But government officials and university researchers have said that even with all of the leaks and the constant dripping of those fountains, those lines only account for about 4.5% of the total water usage, largely meaning it ain't the poor people who seem to always be getting blamed for stuff like this. It's the middle class and the rich people as they continue to fill their swimming pools and water their lawns. Because even though your neighbor, the person across the town, is starving or thirsty, dehydrated, you still got to make sure that you keep your lawn green, right? The search for water has already begun, with many people taking to lines at 3 and 4 in the morning to wait for hours to get water from public parks, various other places, or hoping that a grocery store received the overnight shipment. The city plans to invest in water infrastructure and various desalination plants, things that the city had been told it needed to do by several experts for years past, but they just kept putting it off. And now we find a situation where people are going to be forced to get their water rations from water designation points under armed guard unless Mother Nature decides to let her rains fall. Something that climate scientists say she is less inclined to do because of man-made global warming. And it is important to state at this point that if it gets to the point where they're issuing out rations and they've turned off the tap, they're only going to get rationed 6.6 gallons a day instead of the 13 that they're getting now, or the 23 that they were allotted before that. And it also should be mentioned that even the 13 gallons that they're allotted now is underneath the recommended levels by the World Health Organization. So this water issue is bigger than Cape Town. All of South Africa is having issues with water. All of Africa is, really. It is a continent, however, that doesn't suffer from a lack of physical water. Of course, there are some areas on the continent that suffer from a lack of physical water. But on the whole, the majority of the continent has access to physical water. It suffers from something called economic scarcity, water economic scarcity, meaning that it is too expensive to find, relocate, or develop safe, clean water. Thus, many people are forced to spend upwards of 4 to 5 hours a day transporting water. Now, you think about what that means. That means that there's less time for education for kids. There's less time for adults to work. There's less time for innovation. All the things that require time to sit down or to do something other than walk to a watering hole and fill up a large sack, jerry can, or whatever of water and walk back to your house, there isn't time for. The economic impact of these situations are dramatic, as areas with no access to safe, clean, nearby water are almost always locked into a position of poverty. And this is for the very same reasons that we mentioned earlier. The simple fact is, when you have to spend a significant portion of your waking hours traveling to go get a necessary resource for your survival, you have less time available to spend on things like educational development, economic development, innovative upliftment projects and things of that nature, cultural development. You have less time to do those things because so much of your time is spent surviving. And when you're having to walk 4 and 5 hours a day to get water, look, most people are only up 12 to 16 hours a day. If you're spending a third of that time walking to get water, that dramatically impacts what you can get done in your day, especially when you consider the fact that you have to recuperate after a walk like that, especially carrying around 40 to 80 pound sack of water the entire time. So, and then not to mention the fact that you could very well be dehydrated during this whole process. So this is significant. This water issue is very, very, very significant. And it is something that affects the economics of the situation. You look at Cape Town, if people are having to spend hours waiting on their water rations, they're not going to be able to work. A lot of the agricultural plants, a lot of the agricultural industries aren't going to be able to produce the proper yields of crops in order to sustain their businesses, which means more people get laid off, which also, because this is agriculture, means that people aren't going to have the food to eat. So now, not only are they not working, they don't have any money, but they don't have any food even if they do have money, which puts a strain on the national economy. All of this thing, like water is a key ingredient to modern civilization. And if you remove water from the equation, you pretty much wipe humans off of the face of the earth, right along with life.